coming up.
There were grand visions of millions of acres of farms being developed in Alaska.
Alaska agriculture then and now.
I think we should weigh that one next.
How the grand experiment continues at the Alaska State Fair.
All right, guys, here's the Polish.
And for those of you who had your fill of food at the fair, consider the crunch of kelp. Ahead, you won't want to miss this gastronomical adventure in Juneau.
Sponsorship for Frontiers with Rhonda McBride is provided by your local Alaska Toyota dealers. Toyota, let's go places. Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief that the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to our program. The frontiers of agriculture in Alaska aren't very old. They encompass about a century of change that began with experimental farms, which literally seeded the future. We asked Tallis Kohlberg, who is passionate about the history of agriculture in Alaska, especially in the Mat-Su Valley where he grew up, to help us appreciate a time when no one knew just what to expect. The first farmers in Alaska planted seeds for what was to become a never-ending experiment in which with every crop they learned something new. Despite the giant cabbages and pumpkins,
He's got a very nice pumpkin right there. I'm feeling nervous, to tell you the truth.
when it comes to agriculture, Alaska doesn't always come to mind.
I know that the fishing industry's great up here, but I don't know much about the farming industry.
People are always surprised at the diversity of the fruits and the vegetables on display here at the State Fair.
So you get to see a lot of different things like bok choy and collard greens, turnips.
Turnips that can grow up to more than 12 pounds, or this 40-pound rutabaga.
These are Alaska apples. That tree is got to be approaching 70, 80 years old, if not older.
Part of the legacy of the Matanuska Experimental Farm, which opened in 1915, before this hospital was built next door, even before there was a Palmer or a Wasilla, back when there was a tiny town called Matanuska.
It's one of those things that fewer and fewer people remember because it's gone.
Although the town did not survive, only the train tracks, farming did take root in the region with help from this experimental station.
There were grand visions of millions of acres of farms being developed in Alaska.
Alaska had 7 agricultural stations funded by the federal government. The first were in Sitka, Kodiak, and Kenai, because early agriculture advocates didn't know much about the state and assumed the interior was too cold.
The momentum for that interest picked up in 1898 when the gold rush happened, and there were a lot more people in Alaska.
The need to feed these newcomers to interior Alaska led to news stations in Rampart and Copper Center. The Rampart station was one of the most successful of all, whereas the caption from this photo reads, "There were turnips as big as his head."
The first apples that were grown in the interior of Alaska were, at least the first one that we know about, were grown at the Rampart station on the Yukon River in before 1920. And so the report, I think, shows 3 apples were, and so a success, but nevertheless, something no one would have anticipated.
Each station exchanged personal accounts in an annual publication, some not very successful, like one from a man in Kotzebue.
His report went something along the lines, got it to sprout, then it froze.
At the Kodiak station, there were other challenges, like when the Katmai volcano erupted in 1912. What you see here isn't snow, but ash.
They had a sheep herd and a cow herd that couldn't eat because it was, in some cases, several feet of ash. And one of the immediate consequences was the bears also couldn't eat, and so the bears started eating the sheep.
The Kodiak station was eventually closed.
It's still a spectacular setting.
In fact, this building at the Matanuska farm came from the Kodiak station, taken apart in Kodiak and rebuilt here. So now you know why it's called the Kodiak Cottage. So how old is it now?
100 years.
Today, only 2 of the original agricultural stations remain open. This one in Matanuska and another in Fairbanks, where most of the research now takes place. Hard to believe, at one point there were more than 100 scientists based here.
People who came here were pioneers in the sense that they were coming to something that was largely unexplored for purposes of agriculture.
One thing that hasn't changed over the years, it still costs more to raise food in Alaska than it does to buy it from the outside and ship it here. One more note. Where in the world did the word Matanuska come from? It's Russian for Copper River people. Now there are several variants like Matanuski and Mednovsky.